Every life has a soundtrack. Join me as we invite guests to share their journey through music, one song at a time. 10 moments, 10 memories. I'm your host, Sean, and welcome to 10 Tracks.
Are you ready?
Welcome to 10 Tracks. My guest today is international award-winning Australian composer and pianist, Amanda Lee Falkenberg. Amanda is the creator of the Moons Symphony, a breathtaking orchestral and choral journey inspired by the moons of our solar system. Amanda, welcome to 10 Tracks.
Thank you for having me. It's such a pleasure to be here and talking about our favorite subjects. I couldn't be happier.
Where are you in the world?
I am in Dubai right now, about to transition to our fall and absolutely pretty much guaranteed sunshine, as your part of the world is most of the time in south of France, which is a very special part of my husband's and my travel journey over the years. And you'll see that coming through my track list today, the Francophiles that we are. But yes, so Dubai has been my home for the last 2 decades.
Oh, wow. Incredible. Yeah, you're like the Arabian Riviera, so to speak.
Exactly. That is, yes, that is coming up, that conversation, but truly inspired by Côte d'Azur, our very, very frequent travels over the years. And yes, that has manifested into an album which we adopted a similar name, the Arabian Riviera, and there's going to be more on that conversation a little bit later. But yes, Arabian Riviera indeed.
Well, before we get started on your tracks, tell me a little bit about your background. So Australia, right? You grew up and born?
Yep, I in South Australia. I started playing the piano when I was 2.5 years old. We have a very famous Christmas pageant. And apparently the story goes, I heard the folk song Waltzing Matilda, Australian very famous folk song, and I came home and I proceeded to learn it through ear and played it hands together when I was 2.5. And my grandfather's there, and this famous story is, if you can't afford piano lessons, I'll pay for her piano lessons. So,
oh, wow.
And then I just studied very diligently for the next 2 decades, basically working my way through piano exams, Stedford's competitions, and spent a good quality time just perfecting my craft. And I went to the Elder Conservatorium of Music in Adelaide as the performance degree was very limited at that time. Only 2 of us got in out of the state, which was quite something. And then really from there, I started getting super curious about composing. And it was really from having studied the magnificent piano repertoire and the piano concertos, the Liszt, the Rachmaninoffs, the Chopin, the Debussy, Ravel, all of that. That's the best teacher of what it means to, compose and at least think about, diving into that realm of artistic expression. I remember being in the library looking up the Beethoven piano sonatas and all the recordings. There were like thousands of recordings, and I'm like, I'm sure I don't need to be contributing to another Beethoven sonata CD. So that's when I started getting curious about composing, and it all started in the ballet studio, actually.
So you were already working in like playing. You then started composing, and that's when
I did.
So this was after most of your school, and then you were kind of working in the ballet.
Yeah, I was looking for a part-time job, and someone suggested that the ballet company she was working for, the ballet school, I should say, was looking for a accompanist. And I put my hand up, and I was watching the ballet ballerinas for months, and I was having this music I had to play from. And I remember looking at them going, oh, I reckon I could write music for their dance exercises to sort of help accentuate the different sort of nuances of their routine, etc. And I turned to the ballet teacher one day and said, I think I could probably compose this stuff for you. And so she went off at her lunch break. I stayed in the ballet studio for an hour and started crafting some battement tendus and plie music and all this sort of stuff, and came back and had about 3 pieces written for her on the piano. And I said, does this work? And she just went so enthusiastically excited for me. She's like, yes, it does. And so then I went off to producing 3 ballet CDs called Moving with Music over the next 3 years, original compositions to help with the training ballerina. And then that landed me eventually a job that came up with Australian Ballet Company in 2021. So yeah, so that's all. My composition really does stem from the balletic background, that which is really film in motion, and that's where I have ended up. So it's sort of a natural transition, which I love.
If I understand, this is actually a little bit more complicated than just composing pieces that you want to create that has a feeling, without, you know, kind of choreographing this to like film or live action. This, you know, there's, I guess, some composers, I don't know in this whole genre too much, but I imagine there's some composers that are just writing pieces of music for the sake of it, and it's just a piece. Whereas when you actually have to connect it with live action, or some type of movement, this is quite complex.
Yeah, I mean, but if you're classically trained, which I was, you know the hallmarks to look out for. You've got to determine like the time signature and the main accents of the movement, and you would determine what meter you should be writing in, and whether it's a smooth sort of gesture or a short, abrupt, or all those sort of lyrical versus you know, just all those dynamic expressions that you need to take into your sort of compositional palette, really governs. And it's actually, for me, it felt really easy because it was there, it was right in front of me, and I just had to translate that to the language that I knew. What's tricky is when you're given an absolute clean canvas and said, go and write something, you know, off you go, the world's your oysters. John Williams says a famous thing, you know, when he's in between film projects, he's like, okay, now is my chance to write, you know, not, you know, bound by script or, you know, sound design voiceovers. And he's like, where do you start? Like, the world is your oyster, and you start with what you love. So, but, you know, in terms of, that's why I transitioning to the film genre was a natural progression, because you're bound by those, you know, the emotional landscape, the just the dynamics of the arc, the emotional arc of the story, and all these kind of things that a little bit more subtle, I'd have to say, than an actual ballet, writing for ballet per se, but still very much in the same vein, which I just thrived. I love that place. It's my happy place.
Well, let's get started with your tracks, and we'll dive into your first track. This is Stravinsky. The Rite of Spring, I think, is one of the pieces, but there's also Firebird and Petrushka.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay. And this is from the London Symphony Orchestra, right?
This was the London Symphony Orchestra recording, which again, by the time we hit track 10, the story will become quite full circle in that regard. But there's so much to comment on with this particular piece. First and foremost, it is just so raw, so primal, so, you know, earth before earth, and it sort of again wraps up to the 10th track that I'm going to be sharing with you. And I remember the first time I heard it, I was a bit of a late comer with this piece, actually, and I realised it was actually a gift. I was studying at Canberra School of Music at this point. I reckon I was like maybe 19, 20, and I remember like all my colleagues were like, oh, do you realise we're going to be looking and exploring, you know, Rite of Spring today? Have you heard it? And I'm like, no, I haven't. They're like, what? You're kidding? And I'm like, no, I haven't. Where have I been? Sort of thing. And they said, oh my God, you're so lucky you haven't heard this. Like, you're going to be hearing this for the first time. It had really good quality speakers. And I remember the whole time they were all watching me, because I was sitting sort of in the back row with them, and they've of course all heard it and knew it by heart. So they just watched my face expression the whole time. And I was like, I mean, I'm getting goosebumps just talking about it with you. It was just like, where was I been? I must have been under a rock or something, but it was just, I mean, there's just so much to comment on, the way that obviously it was very revolutionary at the time. There was that, it was obviously a ballet, it was part of the Ballet Russe, the Diaghilev era, the most influential ballet company of its time. It was revolutionary in the fact that, which is where my passion has been always centered around, which is collaboration, designers, artists, dancers, custom design music, dramatic stories, but earthy and relatable, and all these grand themes. And it happens to have an absolutely incredible, phenomenal orchestration, putting the instruments in their high registers to really stretch their capabilities. And that was so foreign and otherworldly at the time. And, sorry, I could probably go on and on and on, but that is, I'm pretty sure there's millions of people that would echo those kind of similar reactions. So that had to go first and foremost on my list. Interestingly, my very first full-length ballet I was commissioned to write, let me do the maths on that. It would have been about 4 or 5 years later, actually. I was commissioned by the Barossa International Music Festival to write a ballet for dancers and for orchestra. And it was a 30-minute ballet for piano and orchestra called Edge of the World. And when I look back on my life and especially my composing life, thinking about that was probably the first ballet that I wrote to my latest big project, which I'm sure we'll talk about it later on. This is the edge of the world, and what was to come was going to be off the world, as we'll soon find out. But the titles for my Edge of the World ballet were very much driven by sort of Stravinsky's influence. The first movement was called Pagan Dreaming. The second movement was Winter Solstice, and Sea Spirits was the third movement, and all these kind of earthy themes that I sort of latched onto and helped with my own inspiration turn into nature to help craft. It was sort of abstract. I worked with a brilliant artist, Amanda Walk, who's an international award-winning artist. So we collaborated with her. So it was kind of a little bit of a mini Diaghilev's in the Barossa Valley. At least it was in my head. And it was a phenomenal. We worked with Lee Warren and Dancers, which was a top ballet company of South Australia. And it was a phenomenal experience. So, yeah, so those two sort of feed into each other.
So would you say that this, the Rite of Spring probably was an iconic piece that kind of moved you in that direction of or one of the first influences?
Yes, but as you'll see by my further playlist, he's absolutely up there. He's like, top 3 for sure. And yeah, I definitely, and I think just so otherworldly at the same time, so cutting edge and so refreshing and sort of breaking barriers, which was, just all those sort of themes that I really resonated with. And I don't think it was, I'd already started composing for ballet well and truly before then. So it more just enhanced my path more than anything. I guess it's probably fair to say.
Yeah. Would you also feel that you being a woman composer is quite unique in this sort of area because it's predominantly male?
Yeah, I get asked that a lot, actually. And someone has made the comparison that more women are going to be likely sent to space than they are going to appear, getting commissions or becoming film composers or this kind of thing. So I didn't know that statistic. I think I have it right. I'll have to double check. But I remember it was quite alarming that I decided to suppress it, actually. Okay. And so, but it was along those themes. And yeah, I don't really play to that card because, that's not my thing. I know it might be for others, but I don't really sort of go think about it from that perspective. I just know what lights me up like a Christmas tree, and I just go after, being in a place that is so nourishing artistically and so fulfilling that whatever gender I am, it doesn't really matter. I'm just happy doing these cool things like creating music that no one's heard before.
I think I've read and also noticed that there's a few orchestras around the world that have played your music. So one of them being the London Symphony, I think Chicago Symphony. I'm sure in Australia, I don't know which city,
Not
but
Australia yet. Not
no?
not at least not for the latest piece that I have composed, but certainly Edge of the World, my ballet was performed with an orchestra in the Barossa Valley for sure. Yeah.
How is there one holy grail, you know, like say the London Symphony, that would be like, wow, this has been the biggest that I'm just so pleased to have kind of know my work or you know, just play my work?
Billion%, yes. There's no shadow of doubt. They are a phenomenal orchestra. And Chicago Symphony was an orchestra who played an adaptation of one of my projects last year, and that was truly phenomenal as well. But having London Symphony Orchestra, you know, the dream team, that was absolutely a career highlight. I mean, their sight reading is just phenomenal. In fact, my track 9 will talk about that even more. And hence the reason why I've selected this type of catalogue for us today. But yeah, without a doubt, I mean, they're the top ranked orchestra of the world, and to have them play your music. And the weird thing is, I've been asked this in several interviews, Sean, and yet the thing is, I wasn't sure how I was going to feel, because I knew it would be a really defining moment in my career, my musical journey. But when I was sitting there listening to the music come to life by living, breathing musicians, what I wasn't expecting was to feel at home. I literally felt like I'd come home. I felt like I'd been on this journey my whole life, and that just sitting in front of this incredible orchestra with this team of amazing people around me, I just went, oh my God, I've come home. So I wasn't expecting that, but I just did feel so, this is my tribe, you know, excuse me. So this was my tribe, and, you know, just, it was definitely a pinch me moment, but it was also feeling very, yeah, just like full circle. And this is why you work so hard your whole life, and this is why you keep dreaming big and you don't stop until your dreams manifest, kind of thing.
Yeah. It sounds incredible. And also, like, if you look at artists and musicians who play their music and perform live their own music, you know, they're the ones who are taking, you know, standing in front. Whereas sometimes if you're not actually conducting this, but you're just listening to an orchestra or symphony do your music, it must be pretty incredible, because you're kind of standing away and you're experiencing it, but it's yours completely, you know, still 100% yours, but through an interpretation almost.
Yeah. You know, the times that, I mean, I'm just thinking back to Chicago last year for the first live performance of the adaptation of the Moons Symphony, the Symphonic Suite. I didn't know until the very last minute before the orchestra was about to begin playing, when Maren Alsop, who was conducting, we gave a bit of a quick speech, myself and the scientists, and we went backstage, had a quick photo, and as I was going back to the audience, she quickly turned to me, she said, make sure you get back on stage, be here for the last movement. And I'm like, oh, okay. And I had no idea, like, it was just sprung on me at the last second. And I'm like, so there I was on the backstage waiting. And she literally, like, so she invited me on stage after the performance. And not only that, she made me take her place at the podium. So I got to stand on this podium, this conductor's podium that, you know, she'd just been, you know, conducting from, and to take the bow. And I just remember that was super surreal, because I wasn't expecting it. And it was such a gracious audience. It was such a, like, that was an out of body moment, because it was kind of interesting, because I was, like you said, I was sitting there thinking that no one's going to recognize me. Like, I'm just sitting here taking in my music and being in my little bubble and happy just to sort of be, you know, wallpaper. And then to know then you're on stage, and then you're looking at the audience who was also, you know, taking in the music. And so that was quite that was quite a shock to the system, to sort of think that you can just sort of hide behind the audience and enjoy the music, but then to be on stage and just be the recipient of their gratitude. It was really phenomenal. And but yeah, it is It is. I mean, but the other thing I want to say to that, actually, though, Sean, is that we're really lucky in this day and age. At least, you know, I'm lucky. I have a husband who's very technically minded and also a phenomenal music composer. We both have really, we've got studio setups where there's a lot of really high quality orchestral simulation, so you can get pretty close to appreciate, like, designing your music so that when you go and hearing a real recording, it gets pretty close. Do you know what I mean? So, you know, obviously there is a big difference, but in terms of you know, your intentions, there's no sort of nasty surprises or whatever, like shocking surprises. So the transitions, they've made it with the technology these days that it is quite profound, the way that you get to experience your music live from how you're designing into a studio. So we're really grateful for that, actually.
That was going to be one of my next questions to ask you, though, is because I think I saw a clip in the studio, your studio, maybe this is in Dubai, I don't know,
yeah,
but you had on the screen, and I could see the different piece, I guess, for all of the orchestral parts, and then how they're kind of blended together for the piece. And it was just, besides writing it down, so to speak, you know, having it on paper, you're already playing the parts or recording kind of a version of the parts so that could be interpreted the way you want it to be interpreted, right? Is that, how is that different from, say, I guess 175, 100 years ago, where you would write it down and then you would have to work with an orchestra that could give you a live version of how you wanted it to sound, right? I guess I'm more asking than I am telling. I know what is.
Well, I just think we're super fortunate these days. And I keep saying, if Mozart was alive, if Beethoven was alive right now, they would be using this technology. I mean, you know, because we don't have to therefore hire out the expense of an orchestra. We have these software programs that can give you a pretty close simulation of what it's going to sound like. So who wouldn't want to try and learn the ropes of that type of technology? And so a lot of my years in Dubai, when I first moved out here, and was with my husband, who really sort of helped open the door for me to, as he said, it's like learning a whole new instrument. You had to learn how to manipulate the electronics to know how to, what they call key switching, which is, you know, how to emulate a staccato sound or a lyrical legato patch for violins, or a collegno battuto with the wooden section of a bow. These kind of things. And then that, I mean, my sessions, I had 2 big Vision Door music computers to try and house these huge libraries. I think, like, it would not be uncommon to have like 90 instruments all in one session, and having to do double screens, and like, it was just huge. It was like, yeah, so it was, we're really lucky to not have to wait for an orchestra and intonation issues, and we've got it at our fingertips now, and it really does make it an extremely exciting time for composers.
Well, we're going to get to track 2. This is Michael Giacchino.
Giacchino. Oh, my Italian's as good as yours, I'm sure. It was as better.
But this
I
is
just
from
said Giacchino, but I'm sure I'm not saying it right.
Giacchino, maybe. Ratatouille, and this is track 6, Wall Rat.
From Rite of Spring to Wall Rats and Ratatouille. I couldn't help myself. I just love the transition. I mean, it shows the Francophile that I am, and the foodie that I am. Hence why I love going to France. But what this is a classic example of, I mean, it is, for me, this is was one of his finest soundtracks he's ever composed. I'm not quite sure chronologically how I was sort of watching his rise to stardom, but when I heard he won a Grammy for this particular soundtrack. But I remember just being I just thought, it is absolutely in like perfection, this soundtrack, the way he takes you on this journey of this rat's life in France. And but I think this again leads into, you know, my what resonates with me as a composer is what we call programmatic music, where you write music that depicts emotions, paints scenes, landscapes, tells the story. You know, he's doing that like phenomenally well in this soundtrack, and particularly this piece as well. And it is just like all those, you know, this is the hallmark. This is like textbook brilliance of a soundtrack. And I was so thrilled when he won the award for it, and he's obviously gone on to do, you know, Star Trek and other cool things. But I really feel this is his finest hour. And yeah, so I had to put that in because I mean, it was quite tricky for me to choose my favorite track from that album, but particularly for those who are familiar with this track 6, it is just everything in like 2 minutes. And I think everyone, the scene is phenomenal as well. Like the actual movie is just brilliant. And yeah, so I just had to sort of, I wanted to throw that in because it's very playful. And that's also what, you know, I think as a film composer, you really need to hit all types of spectrums of the emotional landscape. And he really nails it. And of course, you know, the jazz influence, I'm a big jazz fan as well. And there's lots of that influence in this collective soundtrack as well.
Do you ever, when you're listening to or watching, say, a film or even maybe a TV show, and there's more classical kind of or composed pieces in it, do you get more critical? Are you listening to that, or are you trying to maybe, I'm just focusing on this show and the story and leave it at that, or is your ear kind of going around how they've linked it to the music?
Have we talked about movie soundtracks? Are you talking about that, or just like pure music, like you would be listening to on a radio, or like
no, through a film or a TV show where there's composed music linked into it? You know, especially when they're trying to make a very compelling scene, or it's an emotional scene or a dramatic scene. You know, the music. I mean, if you think about Jaws, you know, that little bit of it's, you know, kind of iconic now. Things like Rocky or Star Wars, of course, which we'll talk about later. But I mean, I think that music, even through Darth Vader when he was coming in, you know, there's that kind of, that always relates to him. And so I think the music has kind of made the film. But I'm just curious, as a composer, or you somebody, you know, who was obviously, music is part of your day-to-day life, when you have to just listen when you're off work, so to speak, and you're just hearing or watching a film and the music's going to it, does that kind of say, oh, I wouldn't have done that, or that seems not the right fit for this scene, or something like that?
Well, I mean, one of the 101s about being a film composer is you're taught, you know when you've hit a good soundtrack is when people don't notice it. So it should be seamless. Like, you shouldn't be, I mean, that's a whole other sort of potential, you know, conversation, but that is really the job of the film composer, is to create this seamless, you know, glue that sort of doesn't upstage, and it just takes the audience on the journey and without interrupting the flow. And so I totally hear what you're saying, but really that should be the role of the composer, the film composer. But there are times, like my husband and I will be, you know, watching like a TV series, and yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say ultra critical, I'm ultra sensitive to how I'm experiencing the full visual music ensemble. And there are times where, and it's kind of rare, where I'll just turn to Paul, my husband, and just say, that was a nice touch. That was just a really nice touch there. Or too high in the mix, you know, music's too loud, you know, should have been come down a bit. So I get, and you don't often hear that because people are pretty good at picking up on stuff like that. But I think, yeah, I think so. Generally, it really should be you know, sotto voce, under voice, as they say in Italian, but still, you know, the foundation of holding that story together. But, you know, when it comes to like listening to like CDs, like the pure music without, you know, a visual story narrating your experience, that's when I get really critical. And, not critical, but I get very sensitive to listening. And so that's why I love going to jazz as my turn-off music, because I don't understand anything about jazz. And so I don't have to sit there and analyze chord progressions and, you know, interpretations of famous literature, music literature. And so jazz is my go-to for my switch-off hour, if you know what I mean. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Would you say you're critical when it comes to crossing more classical music with pop? Or do you feel it's an okay to blend that two together and such?
So you mean incorporating classical and popular music as a hybrid together? Is that what you mean?
Like pop artists have made a song and then they mix a lot of more of an orchestra into this.
Oh, right.
And where, you know, there's kind of meshing the two.
I'm not one way or another. I think it all comes down to sensitivity, and, you know, if it's done well, if it's you know, if it sounds inevitable in terms of, yeah, if it's not like just adding drama for drama, if it does make sense in the emotional palette to bring in some luscious strings and you know, big brass fanfare, go for it, I'd say. But it all comes down to taste, hey, you know, and that's really the biggest thing I think it is for any film composer, is just to have that sweet spot of just knowing when's enough and not too much, and which does come to mind to one of the other people that's coming up in the track list, actually, I want to talk about yet, but I know we have to wait. Yeah.
Well, we get to track 3, and this is Ravel.
Yeah.
Daphnis and Chloé.
Chloé, yeah. So this I had to put in because it is uber luscious. It is, Ravel was revered, was renowned as a brilliant orchestrator. And what I mean by that is his ability to extract the most brilliant kaleidoscope of color from his instruments, from his orchestra, is like next to none. Like, he is just a master of that genre. And it is breathtaking. And again, it's France. Again, there we go. It's back to the Francophile that I am. But also ballet, the dance-like element that he emotes in his music. It's just so breathtaking, so expansive, so cinematic, ahead of his time. I mean, you know, it is just, he's one of my top 3. And so I had to put that in there. And he's this particular, the Daybreak, which he's most renowned for with this Daphnis and Chloé ballet, you know, has been described as the most perfect, again, I'm using that word programmatic music because it's a big thing, at least for one of my projects that I will be talking about later. But programmatic music is, again, just being able to depict a scene, and this is his Daybreak scene, and the way he uses the orchestra to depict the birds chirping, the sun just rising above the horizon. It is, I mean, I just tear up just thinking about it. It's, I mean, people that have told me that have, you know, been exposed to this, just there's not a dryer in the house. It is absolutely phenomenal. So he had to rank in this listing.
When and Ravel is also like bolero, right? That's probably his most popular, so to speak, that maybe is, or at least something that's more commercial that people have heard through.
And he absolutely, I don't know if you know the background to that, I have to quickly share it with you. He absolutely despises the fact that it became so successful, because he did not intend to write it as a hallmark of his work. It literally was a study piece for him, and all of a sudden it just took off, and he loathes the fact that it did that, because it wasn't intended to do that. And he goes on record by getting very annoyed with conductors who don't get the tempo right and takes it too fast or too slow. And so I think he's quite annoyed by the fact that it becomes so popular. And, you know, but when you, I didn't think to put it on this list, but I mean, this is, for me, it's his greatest masterpieces is Daphne and Chloé in the Valse, but his Bolero was certainly his most popular for sure.
Mm. Are there any pieces of music that you would like to take, not your own, but another composers or artists, and make your own version, like another rendition of it that might be slightly different? Because you wrote a good point in saying how Ravel was maybe critical of how people were playing Bolero, but if there is a piece that you are inspired by but want to kind of take it and do something, and some artists do this, and especially in more maybe pop music, they may take a song that's popular from an earlier, you know, time, and they make a new version of it. You see that a lot, and so I'm curious if there's a way that you could, or if this is like a no-no in more the classical space.
Well, it's two ways you can think about this conversation. I think the way you're pivoting from is from the perspective of an arrangement. So you could very well, I mean, that's done a lot, and you can achieve really great results from that for sure. And his Bolero has been made into numerous arrangements. So, but in terms of yeah, so that's very easy to emulate and go after if you had the desire. But just, you know, being a pianist by nature, you are, although you're not rearranging the music, you are an ambassador to the composer in terms of you do have a certain amount of artistic license in terms of tempi and how you nuance certain phrases. I mean, so you do have a little bit of artistic freedom from that perspective, that you can enjoy your own interpretation of their work. Like, that's another way you could probably answer your question if that does answer it. Yeah,
for sure. Is there any pieces that really inspire when you're, do you take on, or even say, for instance, jazz or other kind of genres when you're looking for inspiration to create your work?
I think it is just inherent in you. I think it's in your DNA. If you've grown up with it all your life and been exposed to music, it literally just becomes like the oxygen you breathe. And so it felt like a really natural progression once I hit, you know, in my 20s, that I felt like I was ready to then start being curious about becoming a composer, because I felt like I had, I mean, you know, years and years studying like these piano concertos and these scores and listening to so much music. I mean, that's how Beethoven, you know, operated. He was listening and transcribing everyone's, you know, music to learn, you know, Mozart's tricks of the trade. So, you know, that's how they didn't go to school back then. They didn't go to a composing school. They leaned on their own colleagues to inspire their own journey. And I really felt that, you know, that was the road that I took, at least. And you know, I was even contemplating, you know, maybe I should go and do a course in composing, and so many people advised me not to. They said, you've been doing it all this time. So I feel like, yeah, it was completely, you know, part of my essence. And so it would naturally, I would draw upon it when I came to the time when I was ready to start writing for the big orchestra. I didn't start writing with orchestra. I started writing for piano, which, you know, John Williams always says, start writing for piano and just write little postcards, and then write for string quartets, and then grow your family. And that's pretty much what I did. Not even knowing that was his advice back then, but just, you know, start small and step by step. And really, it's also very intuitive as well. You know, driven by your gut reaction to, you know, the sounds and how you're putting them together. It's also very kind of intuitively driven, for me at least anyway.
We get to track 4. This is Alexandre Desplat.
Display?
display. The Curious Case of Benjamin Button. I've seen this film, so that's a close link. Besides Ratatouille, of course, as well. But
Yeah.
Now this obviously is from the soundtrack.
100%, yeah. This, I wanted to position this in the top 10 because a couple reasons. This piece came out, this film came out around the same time my husband and I were traveling to Hollywood for the very first time in 2009 for a Hollywood Music and Media Awards. And so this brings back lots of beautiful memories of that time. My husband and I had both been nominated in various categories. And so this was literally the soundtrack of that phase of our life, which was very, very exciting. But the thing I loved about, like, this was probably one of the first times I had come to know Desplat's music. And the film was, of course, extremely interesting. But what he does with, this wasn't a case of a soundtrack where what they often, old school style, method of what constitutes as a good soundtrack is having your themes established for your various characters, and keeping them as simple as possible. So then you're able to, as the film develops, you therefore will embellish on those themes to help narrate the journey of the story, etc. And so this example in particular is just breathtakingly simple. It's just like elegance, just super elegant as far as I'm concerned, very balletic. All his stuff to me is very balletic. But just, it's an example of, if I was ever going to teach a film composing course, he just has this simple theme. And if you listen to this particular track, it's just one note that just makes it sound slightly kooky. And that's all he does in this one little passage. And to me, it's just sheer brilliance. I'm like, he's done it. And it just goes to show a perfect case. It doesn't have to be overcomplicated. You just have to make one little tweak, and all of a sudden, it just transforms the experience. And what it's doing at that point, it's showing the kooky element of this whole theme. The whole movie is about aging backwards, and it was absolutely sublimely perfect as far as I'm concerned. And I still, listen to it and go, there's nothing I would change about that. And it's just, for me, just probably one of the most simple examples on this whole list, and yet just breathtakingly brilliant as far as I'm concerned. And so I wanted to rank him on this for that reason. If you ever have a chance just to listen to the soundtrack by itself, it's really classy. It's a class act. Yeah, beautiful.
Are there any other soundtracks that you feel can stand alone, that they don't need to be attached to a film or the in the film, like that just kind of stand alone? I mean, I think
Ennio Morricone, John Barry, am I saying that right? John Barry, Out of Africa, like all those, golden age of Hollywood, all those standalone. Easily by themselves. I mean, even John Williams, you can listen, obviously his soundtracks are standalones for sure. I think that really is a hallmark of a great soundtrack, if it can stand independently from the visuals that it was commissioned to be written for. I mean, you look at Rite of Spring, you look at Daphne and Chloé, the other examples I've given, they've gone off and been standalones and the ballet hasn't been attached to them. So I think that really is the hallmark of a great composer, if their music can have its own longevity away from the visual.
Mm-hmm. I also understand, just the power of music for you and how you can use it, inspire curiosity, reflection, and unity. Tell me about that.
Well, I think it goes back to intuition. It goes down to your personal agenda, your motive, your artistic mission. And, so much of my career was built around film composing and being driven, I would be given a script and I would not start composing until I had metabolized all the nuances of that script before I'd even think about writing a note of music to support that play or the film or whatever it is, the book that I would be composing for, script I should say. And so when I had the opportunity to literally step in as director for my Moons Symphony, I really took on the role of, okay, so here I am, not only director, but, you know, script writer and casting director of these incredible moons that absolutely, you know, just blew me away by their fascinating worlds. And so, you know, when I stumbled across them, I was immediately struck by, oh my God, these moons need music and these moons need emotion. Now, why would I be even saying that? Like, I have no idea why I said that back then, but something like it, just something stirred inside of me that I knew I had to go forth and I think because I was so elated to have discovered that there's just these phenomenal moons out there, I didn't even realize I don't come from astronomy. And I wanted other people to know, because I was like convinced there was others that would not have known about them. Like, here's my chance as a film composer, knowing the power of music to amplify stories, trigger emotional, you know, elicit emotional feelings for people. I'm like, here's my chance to bring forth these incredible stories to other people on this planet and let them know about these incredible missions that are going out and retrieving this information. Here's my job as a film composer. At least here I can put my job as a film composer to do something worthwhile with these stories. So that's probably one of the biggest lightning bolt moments creatively that I have experienced, where to answer that question, where I was really driven and inspired to create for a mission.
Mm-hmm. Would you say that nature as a whole is something that inspires you when you're creating?
100%. Yeah, 100%. Like, for instance, I can even recall a memory when I was writing Edge of the World. I was living in the Barossa Valley back then in a beautiful cottage in the middle of a vineyard, and I would go for daily walks, not for exercise, but just purely for inspiration. And I would go walking the hills and I'd see these big clusters of weeds on the ground. And, you know, they were weeds, but when I would look at them, they were so luscious and green, and I would stare at them and I'm like, oh my God, that's stars. They look like stars to me. And that was the beginning of my pagan dreaming, you know, just the primitive looking up at the cosmos, you know, on Earth and what is out there. And so that was my inspiration for the first movement of Edge of the World. And I was absolutely, yeah, just so struck by that. And I just tell another story. Marnie Walk, I was mentioning her before. She was one who was our designer for Edge of the World, and her mother was an artist as well. And she would tell me this story. You know, she said, Amanda, when I would ever get stuck on what colours, you know, complement each other or work well together, my mother would always say, look to nature. Nature always knows the perfect combination of colours. And I've never forgotten that. And I found that just so inspiring.
That's beautiful. Yeah, I love that. Let's go to track 5. This is Paul Myer Hopkins.
Yes, my husband. Yeah.
Your husband, the Arabian Riviera. I love the title. and the music piece was really inspiration. It's a little bit, now tell me more about this, because it's kind of genre seems different, kind of vibe.
This is that chill out vibe, and he is the absolute master of, I mean, this is like my other favorite go-to. And he won the award, but I was telling you about that Hollywood Music and Media ceremony we both went to. He actually ended up winning the award for this song, 2009, for the Chill Out album, which was super exciting. And yeah, so this is Majestic Maksum, and it's basically the maksum is like a rhythm, a particular drum beat that is synonymous out here in Arabia, which he adopted and then created this awesome piece around. And he's just really masterful when it comes to things like that. And I actually have, I contributed, I think 3 or 4 tracks to this album, and which I was really enjoying immensely. It was quite a departure from what I usually do, but I was having so much fun. And so we co-wrote the album essentially. Obviously he did more tracks than I did, but it was, yeah, so it's a chill out album, and really, as you know, we love the French Riviera, but we also love Dubai. And so that's why we thought, well, let's create an Arabian Riviera chill out album. It's sort of based on the Café Del Mar. I don't know if you know that sort of Ministry of Sound, all those. I kind of sort of my teenagers, I was listening to a lot of that music, and lo and behold, would I ever realize that my husband was actually going to be, you know, a master in that genre. He's super talented. He's about to release another album actually this Christmas. So I'm super excited that he's back into the genre. So yeah, I had, as a personal touch, I really felt like this had to be part of my storytelling, and I'd say that the chill out genre is, I would equate that to my jazz. Like, he comes from a big jazz background as well. So like so that's our, you know, sort of turn off music, if you know what I mean, like the switch off music. But yeah, so I really wanted to bring that into the mix for that personal reason. Yeah.
Personally, I'm a big fan of this kind of music for many reasons. I like, you know, the sounds. I think it's kind of crossing a few different type of genres together. Like you said, jazz for sure, and it kind of mixes. But I also like when, you know, you're on top. I've been in Dubai on a rooftop bar having drinks, and you have some. I don't like it when it's overpowering. It's too much techno, too much talking, or you know, song singing. And I think that's the same for when you're having a dinner party or you're having, you know, friends over. You just want to have a good sort of vibe, but at the same time, you want to be able to still have conversations and stuff. And sometimes people let the music over dominate. But I think it does give you a vibe. It gives you a feeling, and I think it also puts you in such a mood. So it's more than just background music that kind of is there just as noise. I think personally, it does transcend to have people have a good feeling while they're interacting with each other and communicating and socializing, etc.
I couldn't agree with you more. And I think that's like, it's almost like hypnotic and hypnotizing, mesmerizing, like, because it's so subtle and it's so soothing. And, you know, in actual fact, the subtitle for our album is A Cocktail of Chilled Grooves. You know, it's like the ultimate sundowner, you know, like the balmy sun going down. And you're right, like, you're ready to just reflect on the day. It's very introspective. It just allows you just to sort of be in that inner space, and it's not obtrusive. It's just calm and super soothing, and really it's the personality of my husband as well. I think I remember my girlfriend once describing his personality as, she's like, he's just like a sofa. Like, he's just so chilled and so calm. And I'm like, that's such a strange thing to say. But I'm like, actually, he really is like a sofa. He's just very calm and very chilled out and very easy, you know, going. And he's the last in the birth order out of 5 kids. So yeah, so it sort of suits his personality. But yeah, I absolutely agree with your views on that.
Do you and your husband draw inspiration from, now, you know, for living in Dubai, in the region for over 20 years? Do you see inspiration there in a lot of what you're composing?
All the time. I mean, you've got the mosques all around you, and you know, he's one of his trademarks of this Arabian Riviera series anyway, is to bring in the connotation of the region and the particular instruments that are sort of native to this area, native flutes, a duduk, all these particular drum patterns that he brings into the mix to help connotate where we are. And yeah, absolutely draw from, I mean, for me, even in the architecture, like the wind towers, as you know, have been out here. The architecture's stunning out here. And so all of those, and the balmy climate, and all of that has just been a melting pot for us as artists, particularly with this Arabian Riviera CD. And I also I didn't put this on the list, but I also wrote the soundtrack for Wilfred Thesiger's Arabian Sands. I was commissioned to do that many, many moons ago, right back, I forgot what year that was, maybe 2010, 2011. So I wrote this big sweeping soundtrack that also employed those similar whiffs of Arabia, if you like, and brought that into the orchestral sound palette, which was what the director wanted. So yeah, you definitely want to draw on that. I mean, who wouldn't? It's just it's a beautiful, I think it's a good hybrid of blending those elements with this Western traditional orchestral landscape.
Yeah. We come to track 6. This is, again, Ravel.
Yes.
And this is
La
La
Valse.
Valse.
Yeah, La Valse. Well, this makes me this has like a bittersweet kind of feeling about it, because this is also a piano transcription. Actually, you know what? I think it was a piano piece that became, yeah, no, I'm pretty sure it was a piano piece first that became an orchestral transcription. The orchestral transcription, I mean, it's kind of, there's not many truly successful examples of a piano piece being transcribed to an orchestra, which I feel is like really dynamically done brilliantly. But this does a beautiful job of that. And I'm particularly interested in the orchestral version, which is what I sent you, which is the La Valse. Again, just he's showing off his orchestration chops. He is, again, a master of all of that. But the actual piano piece itself is like extremely difficult to pull off, and very, very taxing for the pianist. I remember watching many pianists at the conservatorium perform that in hot sweats. It's fiendishly difficult, and but I have a different experience with the orchestration, the orchestrated version, because it's just luscious, yeah, just great writing for the orchestra, and very dynamic, very balletic. Ravel at his best yet again.
Do you think that, I guess, as a genre, for classical music or orchestra music, it's not gaining a lot of visibility to younger generations? Or do you think that it's still, people are looking to it, or learning?
It's such an interesting conversation. I think the world is changing so fast, like from a psychological perspective, like, the younger generation, it's almost just hard to keep up with what is the growing trends these days, because it's like changing at a breakneck speed to be able to even like peg any kind of comment. My husband's in the education sector, and I am as a boutique piano teacher out here. And so I've been fortunate to watch, I've been a piano teacher since I was 13 years old. So I've been in this game for a long time, but teaching what I want is different than a classroom situation. So I've had the immense joy of teaching phenomenal students over my career. But so to answer that question, and I only speak from my experience as a private piano teacher, it came to me the other day. I have these students who are just so into their piano, like in a really great way, just so besotted with their repertoire. And I'm like, well, this is surprising me, because you would have thought in the day and age of iPads and internet and this, that, and the other, but they are like, and I'm starting to wonder, and I've been thinking about this for a couple of years now, whether music, like the classical music you and I are talking about, I have a feeling it's going to have a big renaissance, because it is like so healing, at least this is my opinion, of course, so healing, so transcendental, so like soul hitting, that I think there's not enough of that experience you can find truly, like with this day and age of, watching TikTok, these influences short in and out, sort of like sporadic. I mean, I'm no expert on this, Sean, and I don't choose to be, and I don't want to be, but just from an intuitive thinking about where this is all going, I really feel classical music, like the legendary classics, they're timeless for a reason. And I feel like no matter what sort of waxing and waning, the generations do over time, I think there's going to be staples that are going to be experienced and appreciated and are going to transcend time and space. I really feel that they will have a renaissance, and when they come out, it will be, I don't know, I think that's how I feel. I don't know if it's, yeah, that's just how I feel.
No, I hope you're right, because I think it's a shame that such a big part of music that has influenced so much of current, because you can't look back on certain genres that haven't had an influence or impact on music today. So it's a shame if that they don't look, because I think when I was a fan of music growing up, and bands that I really liked from, say, the 80s, or that era, I'd look at who their influences were. You know, who were they listening to, and how far were their influences go back, or their influences. So, you know, this is more probably in the pop rock culture, but even when it comes to jazz and classical music, there's so much that has influenced and has contributed to, I think, culture. So it's a shame if it's not still embraced. So I hope I'm going to be positive too, and believe that it will get this renaissance that it deserves.
Well, and it just suddenly occurred to me to talk about this, and I didn't even think that I was going to talk about this, but actually what I'm doing with my Lune program, which is connected to the Moons Symphony, is absolutely all about that. It's bringing cinematic orchestral music into a multidisciplinary educational platform, a theatrical platform where I'm teaching the science, and then I'm basically interlacing orchestral music around the experience for students. So I'm definitely on this trajectory to, you know, break from traditional models of teaching science in one classroom and a music in another classroom, and I'm interweaving them into this Lune program, which is, well, the Moon Symphony is the mothership, I like to call it, and then this Lune program is a way to learn more about the science of these worlds. And so I'm really really committed to this trajectory, because I'm very passionate about bringing the healing properties of music into an educational platform to inspire and also just, you know, soften the hard science that otherwise experienced without music, and just letting students appreciate and have this multidimensional way of experiencing, you know, information. So that's, you know, so to your question, I'm actually I'm producing this new course that absolutely rings true to my passion as a musician, trying to bring back, you know, cinematic music, and, well, not even bring in cinematic music into an educational platform.
And Lune stands for Learning Under New Artistic Regimes.
Yes.
Right? Okay.
Very good. Yeah.
Let's get to track 7. Now, this is actually special because it's not just a classical piece that you selected. It's also composed this is your version that you're sharing. So it's Debussy, Clair de Lune.
Yes, it is. And there's no way that this would not be on the list. This has been a constant companion of mine for many, many years, and it is on the album of the Moons Symphony. I feel this piece everyone can relate to. Everyone has a very special connection with this incredible, evocative composition that is so masterful. And obviously my personal story is the fact that, yes, I got to play it and at Abbey Road Studios, an iconic sound studio of the planet, I guess you could say. And
for sure. Absolutely.
Could you say that? And I decided that I would just play it because I wanted that experience in my life, and it ended up being on the album. And I wanted it on the album because I felt it was a beautiful way of bringing people back down to earth after they've done this solar system exploration. And it's just been my ultimate companion. You were talking about your friend who would pivot to that, you know, track. I think everyone, whether they can play it or listen to it, it just has the most incredible, just nourishing, everyone just, I don't know, just so cozy and yet reflective, inward, outward, inner space, outer space. There's just something in it for all of us that we just all I think we just all sort of tear up, all of us. I don't know anyone who doesn't tear up when they experience this music. I mean, it just goes to show the universality of music, and a simple piano can reduce everyone to this same experience.
It's obviously an iconic piece, and you've done it in an iconic studio. I mean, how does that feel? This has got to be something special for you to just have two things like this that you've been able to achieve in your career. I imagine it's special. I'm not speaking for you, but
Yeah, and I think, yeah, I mean, definitely. And I think there's just so many more layers that make it special. And that is who was there with me. Like, I had some incredible friends that came to the recording. I obviously had my husband there who was producing the album. I had Chris and Cynthia Bake, very dear friends, huge supporters of the Moons Symphony. I had my astronaut friend there. I'd just given her a piano lesson on Clair de Lune. This happened like, you know, so it was just all these like, you know, earthly experiences all wrapped around this composition of Debussy's, that when my mind floats back to this iconic studio, like if I was there by myself, I don't think it would have that same sort of impact. But, you know, it's those layers of meaning, of connectivity with each other, and having these human experiences, and a beautiful piano. And yeah, it was very I mean, yeah, I mean, I wanted to make sure that I did the piece justice. So of course, being, you know, ultra critical about, oh, you know, I hope that voicing was the best way I could have, you know, because it's, you know, you want to do a nice job, and your artistic expression is authentic as well. So, but it's something that's been with me forever. So it was like a companion with me, and it felt like it'd come full circle.
yeah. I used to live very close when I first moved to London back in the early 90s, off of Abbey Road. And so I remember even taking the bus, and I would sometimes walk down towards Marylebone, and you would go past Abbey Road Studios. And it was just then, you know, then I put two and two together with the Beatles, you know, and there was lots of graffiti all over, and the famous crosswalk. But still, after, you know, seeing so many artists who've recorded there, and then when they showed some recordings in the studio, and like seeing inside, it was incredible. So I can imagine that was another, on top of just what you've done, this was a nice added bonus.
And when you do walk into Studio One for the very first time, which I had done before I went to record it, because I wanted to sort of stage it out, and it really does hit you, just the history of the place, and you're just like, I wanted to get all that out of my system before it came to actually performing. And I had fortunately had the chance to do that a couple of weeks before recording, but it was super special.
We get to track 8. This is Danny Elfman, who, from I now understand, because I had another guest who picked the song by him, but from his first band called Oingo Boingo, which I wasn't aware. I didn't put two and two together, but he's like, you know, gone on to make some incredible compositions and soundtracks for tons of movies. And I think he's now pretty much only concentrates on that. It's not like he's going back to pop such so to speak.
And the other sort of interesting thing about him is that he hasn't come through a very robust classical roots trajectory as well. So he's, you know, really very authentic with his voice, which I love, and especially for a soundtrack like an Alice in Wonderland, where it's so whimsical and ethereal, and he just and it's just got so much energy, and it's just him, you know, it is just kooky and quirky, and he just hits all the right tones to encapsulate that exotic world, and it's just brilliant. I'm a big fan of his style, and I wanted him to hit the list. And yeah, and just having the choir in there too, just the innocent voices of the choir, just really, it's so evocative, and I love it. One of my favorite soundtracks.
Is Alice in Wonderland, is that Tim Burton?
Yes, yeah.
It is, okay. Yeah. I remember the film, but
they do a lot of collaboration. Yeah, he's like his go-to composer pretty much.
Yeah.
They're good. Yeah.
But it's interesting how he pivoted from not having such a background into that, into moving in. But do you think it's very, I would find it harder for some artists to do that. I don't think that's something that you obviously must be really talented, or, you know, that you're passionate about, but I wouldn't imagine it's just like, you know, jump into this from there. It's like, you know,
I think I agree. I think he's like the only example that at least I can pull from my mind about how, you know, he's forged this new career for himself, which is not a traveled road by most who've ended up in the film industry. And here he has landed this, you know, big film scores and from his background. So I think it's, you know, kudos to him for forging that career, and it'd have to be driven by passion. You can hear it in his music. It's just, you know, he's just got so much to say and so many, a kaleidoscope of colors that just come forth in his imagination. And I just really salute that. I think he's awesome.
We have one more track to stand in to really learn more, and I wanted to, so many questions I want to ask you about the Moons Symphonies, but we have one track standing in the way, which is a mammoth track. It's not just you know, anything that you just put in there. This is I can't imagine, you know, being a young kid and hearing this for the first time and seeing the film was incredible for me. And there's so much of that whole soundtrack of that album from the film on the album was beautiful, but it just creates magic and create, I guess, so many kids probably my age or similar when they would have heard this as a, you know, young, but it's still today still encaptures that. This is the John Williams and the main title from Star Wars.
Well, yes, composed in 1977. I was 1 year old when this obviously came out onto planet Earth. But I remember hearing it in a friend's living room when I reckon I would have been about 7 years old or something. And I know exactly where I was in the room when they went, hey, we've got to listen to this. They had like all the latest, greatest like VHS, and they're like, you've got to watch this Star Wars. I'm like, yeah, whatever. It's sort of late at night. And I remember sort of just walking through the lounge room and literally stopping in my tracks. And I remember everything around me, like the lounge chair, and just became transfixed on this, where is this sound coming from? And yeah, it's sort of like at the moment, like, where were you when you heard, you know, John Williams' soundtrack? Like, yeah, so it was iconic, you know, for all of us. We all have an association with it, but there's like so many special meanings for me and my journey, because the orchestra that was playing on the soundtrack was the orchestra that we are about to hear, you know, for the Moons Symphony, which is London Symphony Orchestra. And not only that, it was recorded in Abbey Studios. So I was very passionate about that connection and that resonance. And, you know, just a great, you know, talk about great collaboration, Tim Burton and Danny Elfman, well, John Williams, George Lucas. In fact, if you want a really good book to read, George Lucas's biography is absolutely brilliant. It is, he talks about, you know, the makings of Star Wars and all the ups and downs that went with it. It's a really good book. Yeah, so of course, you know, the music is just riveting and luscious. And, you know, one of my other favorite comments that, you know, John Williams, watching him in interviews, just fascinating, the way he pivots around the conversations, and someone would say to him, you know, how do you know, they were talking about Raiders of the Lost Ark or something, you know, how do you put that theme together? And, you know, it's just like, he's like, that theme, he tells the interviewer, he said, that took me weeks to change this note. He calls it the musical grammar he was working on, change that note, and little bit by little bit, he would just tweak. And he said, until it sounds inevitable. And that's when I know that I've, you know, and all his music sounds inevitable. Like, that is his, that's his North Star. Like, and I've just really resonated with that. And that's, you know, so much of my own journey crafting music is driven by intuition, is waiting for that feeling like, oh, yes, that feels inevitable. That, and it does take the enormous, like, it's enormous amount of tweaking, but the nice thing is there's a muscle inside of you that will tell you when you've arrived. And John Williams is the first I've ever heard that speaks of the craft in that way. And it's just so admirable. And he's an example that does not use modern technology. And his comment is, he was too busy to pick up the tools to learn how to, you know, operate these big, you know, music like orchestral simulation programs, software programs that we have access to. He's just like, I was too busy. So he just stuck with the pen and paper, and that's how he's been ever since. So, you know, he's everyone's hero pretty much. And it sort of brings it full circle in terms of my playlist, because of those reasons that I've shared. But also another big reason is, of course, he wrote a riveting soundtrack for what could only be described as the most iconic science fiction movies of all time. And the thing about my inspiration is that it is anything but science fiction, it's science fact. And to hear the LSO, London Symphony Orchestra, play, you know, my science fact adventures through not stars but moons was also very, very deeply satisfying. And so that's why I wanted to position it where it was on the list.
When we get to now your last track, which is the Moons Symphony's Celestial Tug of War, I read a quote. It said, "How did this not exist before?" And it's very ingenious, just like the whole concept. I'm very curious to see how this came about and to understand what, besides maybe some of the inspiration that you have for what you created, but just to understand like when it was just like thinking about these further out moons that you don't see on day to day, how that you could just create this story and this whole around, you know, just the story behind them, but also like making them have a voice, so to speak.
Well, I thank my classical background training for the discovery of these moons, because I was in between film projects and I wanted to write a piano concerto. And so I thought, right, I'm going to write this 10-minute piano concerto. So I did. Actually, that was performed by London Symphony Orchestra as well, with Anna Subalova, beautiful pianist. But the reason why I say that is because the title was called Crossing of the Crescent Moon. And again, back to our John Williams, as I mentioned before, like he always said, when you're in between projects and you're trying to find inspiration, he used to say, well, what do you love? And I thought, well, what do I love? Like here, I've got a blank canvas. I'm not writing for films right now. I'm like, I love moons. I love full moons. I'm like, okay, I'm going to write Crossing the Crescent Moon. Of course, living in Dubai, you're seeing crescent moons everywhere. And so I set about writing this piano concerto. And just before I was about to finish, I thought, you know, I'm just going to step out of my studio and look up some ancient symbolism of crescent moons. So I did for a couple hours, and then all of a sudden I stumbled across this website that said 10 of the weirdest moons of our solar system. And I had my iPad and I'm just like, what? There's more moons I could be writing for? And I started to shake going, oh my God, like, and I remember thinking, gosh, these aren't weird. These are wonderful, these moons. And I just felt sorry for them for some weird reason. And I wanted to start a new project where I would encase their worlds in music. So it was a good incentive to finish my piano concerto, which I did 2 weeks later. And really it was that piano concerto that led me to understanding that there were more moons that I could be crafting for. And that's at least how it began. And then I wanted to do a short list of the 6 most compelling moons. It wasn't 7 back then, it was 6. So I went and started investigating their worlds more and did some research, and that's how I managed to get a short list of the 6 that were worthy, I guess you could say, or at least inspirational enough for me to hinge some creative ideas to craft music for their worlds.
When was the connection with NASA?
Yeah, great question. So here I was, first of all, it started off just by looking at the aesthetics of the moons, going, okay, like that looks interesting to me. That's quite creator driven. That's not quite creator driven. And then as I started doing a lot more research, I was stumbling across this science, and I just felt like it was tapping me on my other shoulder going, hey, can we be part of this journey? I'm like, yeah, because there's actually a lot of science that are attached to their worlds. And so I'm like, well, hang on, if I brought in a choir, maybe they could sing the science and give it more relevance and outreach. So then I'm like, okay, well, let's just bring a choir in now. So this project's getting bigger and bigger. And then as I was getting further into my research, I was seeing a lot of inconsistency with facts and figures and stuff. And I remember feeling quite annoyed by it. So I turned to my husband. I'm like, I need to speak to a moon specialist about this moon. I didn't know they were called planetary scientists back then. And so I'm just like, who can I find? And I remember coming across this certain person. He would be like an Eskimo gear and talking about this moon that I was decided I want to write for. And so I looked him up and I'm like, oh, he's from NASA. And I'm like, I'm just going to email him. And it was one of those black hole emails where you never know that they're actually going to get to them or not. So just sort of writing a little message. And I hadn't even written a scrap of music by that point because I was still in research phase, but I told him about my vision, about how I would like to amplify their worlds through music, orchestra and world stages, and would he be willing to talk to me about the facts of this moon and through a Skype. And I did not think I'd hear back from him. And yeah, so 7 days later, I got an email from Dr. Bob Pappalardo, who is the lead scientist for the Europa Clipper mission, and he agreed to talk to me about the moons. And so hence that's how the NASA connection happened. And he introduced me to the likes of Dr. Linda Spilker, also from NASA JPL, and a whole other team of scientists that I consulted with, who helped, you know, shape the stories of the Moons Symphony.
I mean, it's an incredible story, but did you even expect that to where it was going to take you from where you started with the vision and the concept and the idea to then kind of be put forward in front of NASA with this? I mean,
not at all. And I think it was like, if there's one word I use a lot when I talk about this project, is synergy. Like the synergistic energy around the chain of events was just mind-blowing. And at the time, I was invited to do a TEDx youth talk here in Dubai, which coincided during the creation of the project. So they wanted me to come on the stage and talk about the process, which was awesome. And then obviously that got put online, and then Dr. Robert Pappalardo shared it with the Cassini scientist, lead scientist, Dr. Linda Spilker, who watched my TED talk, and she said, from then I was hooked, and I invited it. She invited me and my husband to NASA JPL in Los Angeles to give a talk to her scientist team for the Cassini mission, which I was writing music for 2 of the moons that the Cassini mission was investigating. And that was definitely a pinch me moment, because like I had no idea that my journey would have landed me in front of the scientists whose inspiration had fed my creativity. And now I'm telling them about my journey. And a lot of them would become the greatest, you know, just what I call the Moon Symphony family. A lot of them came out to Chicago last year to be part of the event, were on stage with me, and we continue to just keep sharing their worlds with as many people and a new demographic, a new theatrical audience. And it's a riveting combination, and they're an awesome crowd to be around.
But did you think you were going to be focusing on science as much? I mean, compared to some of your previous work?
Not at all, because remember when I first saw them, I felt like these moons need music. That was the first thing that came to me. And then right after was, these moons need emotion. And that was it. And so that was my mission. And then, like I said, only when I started delving into the science, or in the research, the science was becoming a lot more prevalent. And I'm like, okay, well, let's pack some science in here, see what we can do. And I think, you know, curiosity was just like really driving all my decisions. I was just curious to see how far you could take creativity.
What's your favorite moon?
You know, I asked Dr. Linda Spilker that one day, because she's on the Voyager team as well as the Cassini spacecraft. And I said, she's like, Amanda, I get asked that all the time. It's like asking which is your favorite daughter. And she's like, I don't know how to answer that. And then, but I actually do. I do actually have an answer. And it is Moon Miranda, and it's the 5th movement, because like I said, I'd only started out with 6 moons, and I felt like something was missing in the journey, and I couldn't put my finger on it. I'd sort of established these were the 6 moons that I was going to write for, very science driven, and something didn't feel right. And I remember for weeks, I just wasn't feeling right about something. And I was talking to my husband about it, and I said I couldn't put my finger on it, till one day when I was composing music for her world, and it's the most torturous world you'll ever come across, and it was the furthest, evidently it's the furthest we'll travel in the whole symphony before we turn our trajectory back towards the sun and come back towards Earth. But I was like literally like just bamboozled by her world, and just the drama and the epicness of her story, what she's been through. And I was like, I just was just so traumatized, it seemed, when I was composing. I just wanted to beam myself out of her world. And then within that moment, it sounds really strange, but I was like, I was back on planet Earth, and I'm like, oh my God, I know what's missing. We need our moon, Earth Moon, to be standing on, looking down onto our Earth, to appreciate what we have here in the solar system. Like, we've gone all out to these exotic moons trying to find life, and there's nothing out there. And yet we need that experience to come back and realize with new perspective of what we do have here. And, you know, talking to my astronaut friend about this experience, who's been up to the International Space Station, she basically says to me, Amanda, you've had your Earthrise moment, like all of us astronauts have. And that's really what I want to provoke with the 7th moon, is that emotional. So basically, I'm going to quickly tell you my elevator speech is the first 6 moons are about the scientific data brought back from the space probes to tell their stories. And the 7th moon is about the emotional data brought back through the hearts of astronauts after seeing our planet from the perspective of Earth moon, to appreciate and to revere what we do have here on planet Earth. So that's pretty much the journey.
What's next for you?
What's next is my lunar program, actually, which is to package. I've done what I call my lunar live events, where I team up with scientists that talk about the science, and then I unpack the creative inspiration. Then we have like an ensemble that performs the music, and the students just like really riveted by the format. And so much so, I've got so much like proof of concept that I'm now packaging into an online program, which I'm super excited about, because I'm about to launch the first module this December. And I have a small cohort that I'll be taking through, and it will be a 7-moon module where I take them to experience all these worlds through science, music, poetry, and the synergistic worlds of scientists and musicians, to appreciate the multimodality way of learning, which I was talking to you about before, about non-traditional ways of engaging students' minds and imagination, and to, just sort of offer it so it has a more global reach. So that's really very time consuming, and but that's my lunar program. So I'm very committed to making sure that that's going to be rolled out in the next 12 to 18 months, so people can access the full, it's like opening up the hood of a car and going underneath to see all the science that really drove the creative impetus behind the Moons Symphony. And that's what I want to achieve with this program.
And it's an online program, or have you done it in person as well?
It's an online program, but I have given what I call the Lunar Live performance, which is where it's a more of a passive experience, sitting and experiencing the information, and whereas the online is going to be much more sort of interactive and encouraging students to delve into their own creative realms, to then apply the synergy of different modalities to create, and based on their journeys to these exotic worlds. So it's super exciting. It's like a little mini Star Wars adventure, but Star Fact adventure with moons. And so I'm sort of excited to roll that out. So I'm very excited to talk about it too.
And Amanda, for people to find you, I know that the Moons Symphony is on Spotify, but it's also, they can find you on Facebook or other areas. Where are you?
Yeah. And website, and you'll be able to see on my website information about the lunar program and upcoming performances, which I have coming in Pennsylvania next year, actually, which is super exciting. The Moons Choral Suite, which will be an adaptation of the Moons Symphony with choral forces and orchestra for the first time in the one room together, the same theatre. So that's super exciting, 1st of May next year. But yeah, so that's sort of got all the updates of what's happening with everything Moons and beyond.
Well, I thank you so much for being a guest today and for sharing. I really enjoyed listening to the Moons Symphony and checking it out. I want to delve a little deeper into it though myself, but I think it's something that hopefully more guests will and listeners can check out and hear. Thank you so much for being here and sharing this. I tell everybody to, when we leave, to be kind, be humble, be loved. And I wish you all the best for more success and any, to learn more about what is the Lunar program, but also other upcoming projects you have coming forward.
Yeah. Thank you so much for this opportunity to talk all things music, soundtrack and life. And Moons, Star Wars, all of those glorious themes. I've really enjoyed our conversation. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Amanda.
Yeah.
Pretty vacant times.
Are you ready?
Yeah, it suffers for his sports jacket.